Hare Krishna, Namaste.
Chapter 13 is entitled as Kshetrajna Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Vibhaga Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. Sloka 15. Sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ sarvendriya-vivarjitam asaktaṁ sarva-bhṛc nirguṇaṁ guṇa-bhoktṛ. Sarva of all, indriya senses, guna of the qualities, abhāsaṁ the original source, sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ meaning is the base for knowledge acquired through the activities of all the indriyas, the senses. Sarva, all indriya senses, vivarjitam, being without. Sarvendriya-vivarjitam, meaning indeed does not require any of the organs. Asaktaṁ, without attachment. Attachment for the body, senses, etc. Sarva-bhṛc, the maintainer of everyone. Cha, also, eva, certainly. Nirguṇaṁ, without material qualities. Sattva, rajas, tamas. Guṇa-bhoktṛ, master of the gunas, yet the experiencer of the actions of the qualities. Cha, also. Translation: the Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he is the master of all the modes of material nature. In the previous sloka, we learned that the Lord can do things without the senses, sense objects, and the body. Now the question comes, so if he does has a body, then his ability to see everything, do everything, be everywhere, etc. will be restricted? The answer, short answer, is no. If he has a body, that doesn't restrict him like us, where the conditioned soul's activities are restricted by time, place, and object. Kala, desha, vastu. We are all conditioned and restricted by these three things. But the Lord is not. I can be only here in this place at this time. I cannot be in another place at the same time. Therefore, the time and place are restricted for me. I can be only in this body. I cannot be in another body. The vastu, therefore, I am restricted by the body, the object. Whereas the Supreme Lord, with his transcendental body, is present everywhere. And without the body, also is present everywhere. Now let's understand more details. In general, we only seen in the world that the ability to perceive an object happens through our senses. If I have hands, I can lift. If I don't have, I can't lift. If I have eyes, I can see. If I don't have eyes, I can't see. But the Supreme Lord doesn't need to have any of these sense organs to get the same result of that derives from these sense organs. he can obtain without the help of these faculties, the senses and sense objects, the body itself. Therefore, the Lord has no attachment for the body, senses, etc. Yet, he is capable of supporting all types of bodies. This is the second aspect. The first aspect is, without the senses, sense, the bodies, the Lord is able to, can do things. The second part of it is, with the bodies, all types of bodies, many types of bodies, like Deva, Manushya, animals, plants, thought, that is moving and non-moving, whatever body he can take, because he is a super soul within all these different entities. And when he does, he is not restricted again by that body, like us, who are restricted by Kala, Desha and Vastu. We are with this body or conditioned or influenced by the three gunas, Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna and Tamo Guna. Whereas the Lord is devoid of these three gunas, and yet he experiences the activities of the gunas. That is the nature of the super soul. In the Vedic literature, we find that his whole embodiment is spiritual. That is, his body is transcendental. He has his eternal form called Satchit Ananda Vigraha, and this is said in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord can exist without a body and can exist with many bodies, as it is stated in the Shruti. So, ekada bhavati, tridha bhavati. Whereas the Baddhatma cannot take many forms during the same period. There are rare exceptions like Saubhari Muni, of course with some limitations. Even he cannot take all bodies. He cannot pervade everywhere. The Supreme Lord can take many bodies and can be without body as well as he desired, and still able to perform all functions. So the question is, what is the situation when the Lord appears in this world? He takes a body, and this world is influenced by the three modes. The answer is yes, but the Supreme Lord is not affected because of the mixture of these three modes, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Even when he appears in this world, he is not touched by these three modes, because he is a controller, he is the master of these three gunas. The slave, the subordinate, cannot control the master. The master has to control the subordinate. The Prakriti is under the control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the Prakriti, which is of three modes, cannot control the Supreme Lord, though the Supreme Lord appears within this Prakriti. The body that the Lord has is transcendental, meaning it is fully made of Suddha Sattva. There is no mixture of Rajas and Tamas. His transcendental body is not like our body, whereas we receive the body and this body is influenced by the karmas and the three gunas, whereas the Supreme Lord is transcendental. Supreme body is not influenced by karma. Our senses, our body are all completely influenced by our karma and the three modes, whereas Lord's transcendental senses are not contaminated. When we read in the previous session that the Lord doesn't have legs, doesn't have hands, doesn't have etc., it means the Lord does not have hands which are materially contaminated, but He has hands which are not contaminated by the three modes and the Prakriti. That is an unique distinction between the conditioned soul and the Supersoul. He has no material eyes, but he has eyes which is not material. So the next question comes, if the Lord has his head, face, hands, legs, etc. everywhere, why am I not able to see it? Prabhupada gives the answer in his purport, that is because of our material condition. We are Baddhatmas, we are conditioned by our karmas and influenced by the three modes. Therefore, we are not able to see the Lord's transcendental form. Just because we are not able to see the Lord's form doesn't mean that He doesn't have a form. When we purify our consciousness, then we'll be able to see His presence everywhere. To summarize, the Supersoul is the original source of all senses, but still He Himself is without these senses, the material senses. His senses are transcendental. Second point is He is the source and maintainer of the three modes, but yet He is not affected by the three modes. The three modes are under His control. The senses are under His control. Therefore, the Supreme Lord can do the things with His transcendental body without any restriction, can perform anything and everything, and present anywhere and everywhere. The Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet He is without senses. He is unattached, although He is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time He is the master of all the modes of material nature. In the previous session, we learned how the Supreme Lord, with body or without body, can perform any activities and is present everywhere, whereas the conditioned Atma can never be like that, as they are influenced by the three modes based on their previous karmas. Now, what we are going to see today is about the Mukta Atma, the Atmas who are liberated from the Prakriti, from the material world, and who are free from the three modes. In the liberated state, these Atmas attain the same nature that was mentioned earlier for the Supreme Lord. They can also take many forms as they desire, as Manushya, Deva, Pakshi, Jandu, whatever they want to. They can also be without body and still they can perform activity, which can be otherwise achieved through the body. And they can do this through their knowledge, through their consciousness, which is fully blossomed in their liberated state. None of these are possible when the same Atma was in its conditioned state in the Prakriti. because of their restricted knowledge, consciousness, which are influenced by the Prakriti and the Gunas. So, in the liberated state, the Muktatmas, whatever a Baddhatma can do can be done by the Muktatma. But the reverse is not true. Whatever Muktatma can do cannot be done by Baddhatma. Muktatma can take many forms out of his free will, whereas the Baddhatma cannot do so. The Muktatma can do functionality even without the senses and body, whereas Baddhatma cannot function like that. It requires the senses and the body to perform any activities. Now an important question comes. If the Muktatma are situated in the spiritual world, then how can they attain various bodies like Devatas, Manushyas, etc.? Question 1. Question 2. In the spiritual world, there is no influence of the three modes. Then how can they experience the things that comes from the three modes? Because one of the things that Muktatma can do in its liberated state is, though they are free from the three modes of material nature, but if he so desire, he can enjoy the three modes as well. Let's see the answer on these questions. The Muktatma can take body coming down into this material world, if they so desire. Likewise, they can take any types of bodies even while they are in the spiritual world in the service of the Supreme Lord. By swabhava, by nature, the spirit soul does not have the senses or body in the liberated state, but if desired, it can attain whatever the body it needs, and not just one body. It can take any number of bodies. That's what sarva-bhṛc means. But this is not possible for the Baddhatma. The Baddhatma can also take many bodies, but not at the same time. It finishes one body due to its karma and takes another new body, and it continues like that. Whereas the Muktatma, who is free from the karma, can still take any number of bodies. This is out of its sankalpa, free will. Though this has been bestowed upon the Muktatma by the Lord, they do not use it, misuse it for any sort of fun. Rather, they use these things under the direction of the Supreme Lord in service of the Lord. Regarding the three modes, the gunas, in the liberated state, there is no possibility of the self, the Atma, to associate with the Prakriti, as it doesn't exist in the liberated state. Therefore, it cannot experience the enjoyment caused by the gunas. But when the Muktatma has been dictated by the Supreme Lord's will, the Muktatma will never go through any difficulty, even though they have to go through the three modes of material nature in the Prakriti. To summarize, the Supreme Lord, who has the ability to function without a sense object, At the same time, he can also function with the sense objects, which are not limited. And the same applies for the liberated souls, the Mukta Atma. By nature, the Supreme Lord is not affected or devoid of three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. Yet, he experiences the activities of the guna. Same applies to the Mukta Atma as well. This is the idea behind this sloka. Sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ sarvendriya-vivarjitam asaktaṁ sarva-bhṛc caiva nirguṇaṁ guṇa-bhoktṛ.
Namaste. Hare Krishna.